What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Brawl Project. Tomorrow is a very special day for the FNM at home on MTG Arena. They're going to have a Historic Brawl event, and Historic Brawl is a format that not very many people play, but it's definitely one of my favorites. I think it's an absolute blast, and I think that if you participate in the event, you'll come to enjoy Historic Brawl as well. So, I don't think there are a ton of resources out there for Historic Brawl, so today we're going to go through 7 deck techs of a variety of different decks, and I think that there's going to be something that appeals to everyone. If you like this video, be sure to do all the things. All the links are in the description. All the deck lists are in the description. Just one thing before we get started. I will be streaming Historic Brawl all day tomorrow, basically from noon Pacific until whenever they kick me off or whenever I run out of energy. So if you're interested in watching a Brawl stream, check that out. Alright, on to the deck techs. Alright, the first deck we're going to look at today is Zacama Primal Calamity. This is one of my favorites, and in fact I've already done a video on this one with the deck tech and some gameplay, so I'm not going to elaborate on it too much here. Zacama's a 9-cost commander. This is a ramp deck. It plays 30 lands. I love my ramp decks. It's an absolute blast to play. I made some adjustments to it with some of the new Theros Beyond Death cards and some of the new Historic Anthology cards. But I'm not really going to go over them too much. Just if you want to learn more about this deck, check out the other video, or check out the link in the description with the deck list. Let's go on to the second one, which is also a ramp deck. Deck number 2 for today is the Gitrog monster. Now, the Gitrog monster is not in one of the anthologies. It was added as a reward for Brawler's Guild Hall, sorry. And it's a really sweet commander. I've seen people play it in full 100 card commander, and I've been loving playing this in standard and really looking forward to the opportunity to play it in historic. So it's a 5-mana commander, green-black. It's a 6/6 death touch. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this unless you sacrifice a land. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever one or more lands are put into your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. So this deck really relies on the fact that it's able to play multiple lands a turn, and also that it's able to, well, get lands in the graveyard and take advantage of that. So it capitalizes on a lot of the non-basics. There are some really powerful non-basics in Historic, and this deck really looks to capitalize on that. Let's start with that. Let's look at the lands that we have access to. And as you can see, this land list is really long. We've got your, mana producing non-basics. Lotus Field is good because when it enters the battlefield, it sacrifices lands, which lets you draw a card if you have the Gitrog monster out. So as a common line of play is playing Gitrog on 5 and then immediately playing a Lotus Field or Fabled Passage in order to sacrifice a land and draw a card. You've got a few more lands that sacrifice themselves for various reasons. Field of Ruin, for example, Ghost Quarter, Cryptic Caves also. Each time you sacrifice these lands, you get to draw a card plus get their normal effect. Then you have some lands that are really powerful and help you really get ahead in resources, like Field of the Dead, that can make an army of zombies for you, especially when you're playing 2 lands per turn. And where's the other one? Arch of Razka. This one, if you have enough permanents in play, and this deck gets a ton of lands into play, can really take advantage of the fact that you get to draw a card using just your lands every turn. So those are some nice non-basics that you have access to. And then you have, some defensive ones, Labyrinth of Scophos. I don't think I have Mobilized District in here. I usually like it. It's worth considering, but I just felt like I had too many non-basics that only provide colorless. And then, of course, you have all sorts of great non-basics that help with your mana base, the duels. One sweet addition is the cycling lands from Onslaught that were added to one of the Historic Anthologies. Remember, the Gitrog monster says from anywhere as far as lands going to the graveyard. So if you cycle a Baron Moor, you get to draw a card from the cycling, and you get to draw a card from the Gitrog monster. It's really sweet. You get to draw a lot of cards. This is all about drawing lots of cards and playing lots of lands. So we want other ways of getting lands into play. Dryad and Elvish Rejuvenator and Swordtooth all help you get those lands, deploy those lands faster. Grazer also does the same thing. Cavalier of Thorns does a few neat things. It also can get lands into your graveyard for both the Gitrog's trigger, but also for Crucible of Worlds, and this is probably the strongest card in this deck. If you pair the Gitrog monster with Crucible of Worlds, you sacrifice your land, but then you have a land in your graveyard that you can play immediately. It's really nice, especially if you have something like Fabled Passage. You just get to draw a ton of cards. It's absurd value. So this is a huge addition that's only available in Historic. Another huge addition that's only available in Historic, Scapeshift. As you can see, I don't own any card yet, but I will definitely be making a copy of this card for tomorrow when the event starts, because for each land you sacrifice, if you have the Gitrog monster out, you get to draw a card. And on top of that, what you can do is, if you have 7 lands, you can sacrifice all of them and get Field of the Dead, and get 6 other lands with different names, and then get just an army of zombies, just for the 4 mana of Scapeshift, and then your graveyard stocked for a future Crucible of Worlds. The rest of the deck is pretty much just looking to trade resources. When you're amassing a lot of resources, you want to trade the ones that you have. So we've got removal like Murderous Rider, Eat to Extinction, Price of Fame, Ritual of Soot, some discard because we don't really have good defenses against big things without counter magic. Liliana, Thought Distortion's a really nice one. I like this card out of decks like this that are like looking to play a long game and kind of weak to like a big Planeswalker or Mass Manipulation or something like that. And then the big one, Casualties of War. This is a big draw to play in green-black because it just kills so many things. It kills so many things. It's absurd. It feels pretty dirty when you play it. One more interaction I should mention is Underrealm Lich. When you have Underrealm Lich and the Gitrog monster out, yeah, that's 2 5-drops, so it's going to be difficult to assemble, but this one can be undestructible, and this is your commander. And when you would draw a card, if you take a card that's, well, whatever card you take, if one of the cards that you put into the graveyard is a land, then you get to draw another card and do this process over again, so you can draw a lot of cards this way. So it's really sweet. Anyway, this is one of my favorite decks, it's one of my favorite decks in Standard, and I'm really looking forward to playing it with the upgrades that it gets for being in Historic. Alright, let's go on to the next one. Alright, for those of you looking for an aggro option, here I have Erebos Bleak-Hearted. This is a mono-black aggressive deck, but it also has some good staying power as opposed to, red decks that might fold to sweepers if they're just playing a lot of creatures. So Erebos the Bleak-Hearted is a 3-in-black legendary enchantment creature god. So it's not a creature unless you have 5 or more devotion. It's a 5/6, it's indestructible, and importantly it has, whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life if you do draw a card. So basically it gives you some insurance if your opponent wipes your board or uses a lot of removal on your creatures, or if you're just sacrificing your creatures for some other effect. And it also has an ability to sacrifice another creature to give target creature -2/-1 until end of turn. I don't think this comes up that often, but hey, it's there if you need it. The rest of the deck is pretty self-explanatory. We've got, just a lot of efficient creatures, and especially ones that have double black in their mana symbols. The more devotion they can add for Erebos, the better. We've got even some triple black cards. Ayara, Dreadshade, not Phyrexian Arena. Underworld Dreams, there we go. I guess Cavalier of Night is technically triple black. Anyway, so what you're trying to do is you're just trying to build devotion to make Erebos a creature and start attacking with it. I mean, you want to get Erebos down pretty quickly, and then if your opponent kills your creatures, that's fine. You get to draw cards to replace them, and eventually you turn Erebos into a creature and start beating down with them. So the curve's pretty low, especially for a Brawl deck or a Commander deck. But that's the plan of this deck. It's trying to beat down. It also has a nice little package of zombies and skeletons. As you can see, we've got Death Baron, which is really sweet. Giving skeletons and zombies death touch is usually a big deal, which means that they always trade up. They're usually pretty small creatures. Diregraph Ghoul, zombie, skeleton, Gutterbones. This is not either one of those, but Stitcher's Supplier is another zombie, and zombie, skeleton, zombie, demigod. So there are a lot. Oh, and Dreadhorde Invasion does make zombies. So there are a lot of things that get buffed by Death Baron. So that's a nice addition to this deck. I do go a little big with Cavalier of Night and Liliana. I think both of those cards are just like really strong. It's hard to not include them in a mono black deck, even though they are pretty expensive. And the Cauldron of Eternity is also kind of a nice one. I'm not 100% sure about it, but it seems like a nice addition for the devotion. And it seems like in a deck that just has so many small creatures, you can discount its price pretty easily. Yeah, that's about it. We've got like a removal suite. You get to play Walk the Plank because all of our mana sources produce black mana. Spark Harvest is probably fine in this deck. Direct to Underworld, Price of Fame, both good removal spells. We get to play Ravenous Chupacabra, which is a pretty nonsense card if you ask me. And for the mana base, we're all black sources because we have, we're intentionally slanting the deck toward requiring black mana symbols. So we just want to make sure that we can play them at all times and make sure that we're not, we don't have lands that are useless because they produce colorless mana when we need black mana. So pretty simple mana base on this one, but I think this is going to be a nice little aggro deck. And if you like things that have sacrifice synergies or are able to draw cards when your creatures die, this gets the job done. Right, on the complete opposite and other end of the spectrum from aggressive decks, we have Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Now, this is not a deck that you'll see me playing, at least not for very long, but I know there are some of you out there that just love your blue-white control, and this is the deck for you. Teferi, of course, 5 mana Planeswalker, 3 white and blue, 4 loyalty. The +1 is draw a card at the beginning of next end step, untap 2 lands. -3, put target non-land permanent in its owner's library third from the top. And -8 is you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls. How much do I really have to say about this deck? If you've played Magic for a while, you know exactly what's going to go on here. There's going to be a mirth of counters. We've got Mystical Dispute, Whirlwind Denial, Didn't Say Please, Sinister Sabotage, Thought Collapse, Tail's End, Thassa's Intervention, Disdainful Stroke, Negate, Quench, Dovin's Veto, Absorb. There's a lot of counter spells. For things that slip through the cracks, we have Teferi's -3, but we also have Sweepers, Settle the Wreckage. Oh, geez, Settle the Wreckage. I hate playing against this card. Cleansing Nova, Time Wipe, and Shatter the Sky. We've got Elspeth Conquers Death, which is an insane removal spell that's coming out of Theros. Blue decks should not get access to this type of effect in Mindstone and Arcane Signet. It just makes it too good. As you can see, I'm not really your typical blue player. We've got a few more things for things that slip through the to handle creatures that slip through the cracks or other threats. Unsummon, we got Blink of an Eye and Brazen Borrower. If things do get through, of course, we also have Teferi, Time Raveler, so our opponents can't place instants at instant speed. And that's pretty much the deck. Leyline of Anticipation is a nice addition because if you can play the sweepers at instant speed, it just feels disgusting. And then Elspeth Conquers Death also, or it's like taking control of one of your opponent's creatures at instant speed. Oh man, it's just gross. So how does this deck actually win the game? Because that's a pretty good question. Well, you can steal your opponent's best thing. Well, okay, first of all, you can bore your opponent to death and make them not want to play anymore, which I think is the general result of, or the general victory clause for this type of deck. But you can also steal your opponent's best thing. Agent of Treachery or Mass Manipulation should do the job. If that doesn't do it, you have Field of the Dead, and you have a bunch of, you just get enough lands so that Field of the Dead starts making a creature every turn, and once your opponent doesn't have anything anymore because you're exiling everything with Teferi's ultimate, then, well, you just attack them with 2/2s, and there's not enough they can do. Or, if none of that works, all you gotta do is you get the ultimate of Teferi off, you exile all their permanents, and then you play the slow game of playing Teferi, tucking himself, playing him into your deck. Well, this is assuming you have no cards left in your deck. You play Teferi, you tuck, you -3 on himself, put him into your deck. He's now the only card left in your deck. You draw Teferi, play him, tuck him, do this, rinse and repeat while exiling a permanent of your opponents every turn, and that they just can't do anything. They're just in a lock, and they're eventually going to deck out. Takes a while, but it's very satisfying for some people. No actual judgments for people that like playing control decks. I think control's fine. I just think that it's kind of silly, like how the end of the game ends out. But anyway, this is for those of you who love your blue decks. This is, the counter magic and the sweepers are fantastic, and Teferi is like super strong, getting access to that every game. You get a lot from Historic playing blue-white control. For those of you who like blue decks but might not like counter spells that much, this deck might appeal to you. This is Emry, Lurker of the Loch, another commander that's in Standard that I have had a ton of fun playing. but I think it gets a lot better with all the neat new tools you get from Historic. So Emry is a 3-cost commander, but she has affinity for artifacts. So she costs 1 less for each artifact you control, and this helps discount the commander tax too. So even if it's the 3rd time you play Emry, she'll have a cost of, 7 total? But if you have 6 artifacts in play, that you can just pay 1 for it, and it's really powerful. So when Emry enters the battlefield, put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. She also has an ability to tap, choose target artifact card in your graveyard. You may cast this card this turn. So this is all about the recursion. This is all about recurring artifacts from your graveyard, having lots of artifacts in play to discount Emry, and just using that as a card advantage source, and then eventually winning with something big. So the ideal game plan is to go 1-drop on turn 2, and then Emry. You can play Emry on turn 2, or 1-drop into Arcane Signet into playing Emry. And then, if you're really lucky, you can even play a Mox Amber on the next on that turn, and still have a mana left over to, I don't know, play another artifact or sacrifice something. So there's a lot of explosiveness in this deck. You can get off to a really fast start. The way that this deck generates value is usually with these, quote, eggs. They're not quite the same as eggs, but they're pretty similar. They sacrifice themselves to draw a card, and they go back to the graveyard, so you can just tap Emry, get them back, and then draw another card for 2 mana each, which can be broken up. Aside from those, it has, the mana artifacts. We get Mind Stone in Historic. That's a nice addition, although I would say Arcane Signet's generally better. I don't know. Mind Stone might be better than this one. It also sacrifices to draw a card. We get access to Treasure Map, which is a nice one. It's an artifact that turns into a land, which is something that appeals to me as someone that likes having lots of lands in play. We have access to the Antiquities War, which is a nice win condition. You just turn all your artifacts. You have a bunch of these dorky artifacts in play. All of a sudden, they become 5/5s, and you just attack for a ton in 1 turn. We have Karn, which actually uses the -2, the last ability, in this deck more often than anything else, just because it helps build your board presence, and you have a lot of artifacts in order to assemble an army. Another neat one from Historic is the Immortal Sun. Yeah, you have a couple Planeswalkers here, but a lot of people are playing Planeswalker Commanders, and this just totally shuts them down. It does cost 6, but you get to draw an extra card each turn. Spells are cheaper. You get to deploy them faster. It's a very powerful card. And then, of course, one of my favorites, God Pharaoh's Statue. If you land this early in the game, if you ramp up to it, a lot of people just fold to it, just because it slows them down so much. It's even better than destroying 2 of your opponent's lands. Yeah. So, not a ton of counter magic, but we do have blue cards that interact with artifacts, like Sisay. Renowned Weaponsmith is fantastic because it basically just provides 2 mana in this deck, which is an awesome turn 2 play. And then a few ways to protect yourself. Negate and Spell Pierce, I think, are the best to prevent your opponent from doing something really unfair. And a few ways of dealing with Resolve Permanence, Mass Manipulation, and Age of Treachery. You also have Meteor Golem, which is a nice one because you can recur it with Emry. It's probably not dying too often, so if you mill past it, then you get to tap Emry and get it back and kill something. So that's an option from the graveyard. So I mean, this is a really fun deck. It's really surprisingly fast. It doesn't play like any other deck out there, really, like, because your commander is so cheap. It doesn't suffer from the commander tax as much, and you get to do a lot of recursion, which is pretty cool. Oh, one more card I forgot to mention with this in the Teferi section, but Search for Azcanta is like one of the most busted things I've ever seen printed on a Magic card. It was in the Teferi deck too, for sure. It's just nonsense. This helps fuel your graveyard for Emry, and it also takes advantage of the fact that if you do have 7 cards in your graveyard, which is not difficult with Emry, then it becomes a land, and 2 drops that become lands, that's so powerful. I might be a little obsessed with lands. Alright, so this is a really neat one. You also get to play Shimmer Dragon, which is one of my favorites, but that's kind of on the side of, it's a way of eventually winning once you do all your artifact recursion shenanigans. The mana base is actually kind of interesting in this one because you have so many cards that are colorless. You get away with playing so many colorless lands for a monocolor deck. We only have 19 blue sources. So you get to play Arch of Orazca, Field of Ruin, Ghost Quarter, Labyrinth of Scophos, Mobilized District, and Zhalfirin Void. Zhalfir and Void might be a bit of a stretch, honestly, but I think you can get away with it in this one because you have a lot of cards that produce colored sources. You don't need a ton of colored sources, and you have so many things that just don't require colored sources. Anyway, this one is, I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to playing it tomorrow. So if you like artifacts, you like blue, but you're not a huge fan of counterspells, this might be the deck for you. Alright, let's take a look at the other side of the coin, which is an enchantments deck. Alright, Calix Destiny's Hand. Pretty fun in Standard, but again, I think it's even more interesting in Historic, where you get access to, well, the Historic-only cards. Calix is a 4-mana Planeswalker from Theros Beyond Death, green-white, 4 loyalty, +1 is look at the top 4 cards of your library, you may pick an enchantment and put it in your hand, the rest go on the bottom. -3, exile target creature enchantment you don't control until target enchantment you control leaves the battlefield, so it basically turns one of your enchantments into Oblivion Ring, or sorry, Banishing Light, I'm used to the old card, and -7, return all enchantments from your graveyard to your battlefield, getting a ton of triggers usually when you use this. Okay, so this is going to be an enchantment control deck. You can play some more creatures, especially with the enchantment creatures of Theros Beyond Death, but I think it works best as just something that's trying to grind for value and protect Calix. So, I think that the big synergy you're trying to set up is Sigil of the Empty Throne, which makes it so that you get an angel every time you play an enchantment, which is pretty cool. You have to cast the enchantment spell, however. Like, if you minus with Calix, that is not going to produce angels, but still you have, the deck is like a third enchantments, so you'll get an angel fairly frequently with this. And then the other one is Divine Visitation plus either Dawn of Hope or Castle Ardenvale. And of course, this is something that you see in Standard Brawl all the time. It's really powerful. I mean, you just get to make a ton of angels, and those angels they're sizable. They're 4/4 flyers. They have vigilance. They attack and protect. You also have Field of the Dead in order to help you make tokens that will turn into angels with Divine Visitation. All right, so let's talk about some of the control elements. Of course, we've got our sweepers. These are not enchantments, but they're still very important for the deck. Realmcloak Giant, Shadow the Sky, and Cleansing Nova. There we go. These are sweepers. They clear the board to protect Calix. We've also got targeted removal and like Baffling End, Seal Away. Of course, the Banishing Light effects like Banishing Light, Prison Realm, and Conclave Tribunal. And one nice addition to this deck, or cards that work really well in it, I should say, are the Sagas, because the Sagas go to the graveyard on their own. So they're already... One thing with enchantments is that they tend to stick around, right? Sagas go to the graveyard, so they set up for Calix's eventual ultimate. So History of Benalia is a good one. The Birth of Meletis, also nice defensive saga, and so is Elspeth Conquers Death. They also behave more like spells than enchantments, which don't usually have big immediate effect. These do. What else do we have? Well, we've got a few things that want to play with lots of enchantments, like Archon of Sun's Grace, helps you make an army, and where is the other one? It's the Stethian Champion. There we go. Constellation, draw a card each time you play an enchantment spell. We've also got Satyr Enchanter, which is basically a worse Stethian champion, but, you know, we'll take what we can get with it. Nyx Fleece Ram is a pretty nice blocker. And, yeah, we've got, like, some ramp cards. Woeful Haven, Gift of Paradise, Omen of the Hunt. So, we're trying to get up to a fair amount of mana, sweep the board, protect Calix, use a few enchantment synergies to either draw cards or play angels or what have you. So, that's the goal behind this deck. I think this is going to be a little clunky, but... the Calix deck that I played in Standard worked reasonably well, and with the upgrades of things like Sigil of the Empty Throne, and I think Baffling End is actually a pretty big upgrade, and so is Nyx Fleece Ram. I think those are going to help a fair amount. Also, going Nyx Fleece Ram into Heliod Sun Crown sounds fantastic. One more thing I should mention about this deck is that we are playing Knight of the Reliquary. This is the first of 2 decks that I have today that are playing Knight of the Reliquary. If you've never played with this card, it's an absolute blast. It was my favorite card to play in Legacy way back in the day that I used to play Legacy a ton. Knight of the Reliquary helps you tutor for lands, and that's really important for when you're when you have Field of the Dead in your deck, basically. The activation can make a zombie if you have Field of Dead in play and you have enough different lands, and it can go find the Field of the Dead. It's a land tutor. So that's a big inclusion, even though it doesn't have a ton of synergy with the rest of the deck. I think it's a really big inclusion in Historic Brawl for any deck that's playing both green and white, because most of the time you're going to want a Field of the Dead, or maybe a Field of Ruin to deal with a problematic non-basic that your opponent might have. So yeah, if you like enchantments, this is probably the deck for you. It does play out more like a control deck, whereas the Emry deck, even though artifacts and enchantments have some overlapping similarities, the artifacts deck plays a lot more like an aggro deck, while this one plays a lot more like a control deck. All right, we have one more deck for you today. It's another green and white deck, and we'll get to that one in just a second. All right, for the last deck of the day, we have Captain Sisay, another favorite of mine for when I used to play a lot of Legacy. I would try to fit this in decks, but those of you who play a lot of Commander probably know this from Commander, because you get to tap and search for a legendary card, reveal that card, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Unfortunately, there are no legendary lands, at least no legendary lands that you can get. You have to get them off of something like Legion's Landing, but that is an extremely powerful ability. You basically get to tutor your deck. You just have to have some deck building restriction for Captain Sisay. She's a 2/2. She costs 4 mana. You're basically just trying to keep her alive so that she can tap and just gain an incredible amount of value. Tutoring for, tapping to tutor is just so powerful. So, as you might expect, this deck just has a lot of legendary cards. I didn't do a count, but it looks, just by the card frames, you can tell that most of these are legendary. Alright, where to start? Well, this deck is based off of having an army and protecting it. So, we're playing a lot of Mana Dorks. These are the non-legendary cards that help you play Captain Sisay a little early, and yeah, that will hopefully get Sisay down a turn earlier. Then you can tap Sisay and go search and just play stuff. You're really relying on having synergies between the permanents you have in play. So, for example, a Growing Rights of Itlimok replaces itself, yes, but if it replaces itself and then becomes a land that taps for a bunch of mana, that's what you're looking for. You want to have this and a lot of creatures in play. Legion's Landing makes a 1/1. Yes, you get some value up front, but what you want is for it to become a land. So this deck really relies on having an army available, like, on the board. It makes use of the Mana Dorks in that way. It makes use of Sisay and makes use of all the random creatures that you have. So let's talk about some of the targets. I already mentioned a couple of these that turn into lands. But we also have plenty of creatures, as you might imagine. Thalia, slowing your opponent down. We've got plenty of non-creatures. We have plenty of creatures in order to get under the Thalia attacks. Shalai protects your other creatures. Teshar gets stuff back. It's very powerful. Questing Beast attacks down planeswalkers. You've got God Eternal Oketra, makes an army. Lyra, just a big heavy hitter. Tristani buffs everything else. And, geez, you can even get Urza's Ruinous Blast, which is kind of absurd. Like, being able to go Captain Sisay and then Urza's Ruinous Blast the turn after, because, well, I mean, Captain Sisay, next turn, tap Captain Sisay, play Urza's Ruinous Blast, seems pretty nice. We've also got some cards for late game staying power. Godpharaoh's Statue, of course, a favorite of mine. If you can get up to this card early, it can really hamper your opponent. The Great Henge, taking advantage of how many creatures you have and able to, just keep the cards flowing. Circle of Loyalty, you have a ton of legendary spells, so you get to make a lot of 3/3 knights. I mean, they're 2/2s, but they get buffed by 1. You don't have a ton of knights, so you're usually playing full retail value for the Circle of Loyalty, but I think the payoff is good enough that you're interested in it. Helm of the Host is a nice one. I mean, if you have if you just have any reasonably sized creature and you equip Helm of the Host to it, you can make a terrifying board presence really quickly. Blackblade Forged works so well on legendary creatures. It just provides a huge bonus. These are all legendary cards that you can search up with Captain Sisay. Of course, we do have a few planeswalkers. Nissa, you know by now, Nissa's fantastic. Vivian, this one's actually really key because this deck, because it has so many legendary permanents, I mean, yes, Urza's Ruinous Blast is a legendary sorcery, but for the most part, we're playing in permanent cards. And a lot of them don't remove things very well. So that's one thing that Vivian does, is that she can use the creatures that you have on the board in order to take down creatures that your opponent have. It's removal in a deck that doesn't otherwise have a ton of removal. We're also playing a few Banishing Light effects and Banishing Light and Conclave Tribunal, but we're really focused on things that we can search up with Captain Sisay. Gideon Blackblade, another Planeswalker, and the Wanderer, which is a nice one. I have terrible flashbacks of what happened when I played against the Amazonian in Brawl Hall 3 and with the Wanderer on board, but also just being able to exile opposing creatures. A lot of commanders have power 4 or greater. One card that seems like it might be a little out of place is Crashing Drawbridge, but any commander that has a tap ability, I tend to really like Crashing Drawbridge. It lets you get it to turn faster, and that's usually a really big deal. All right, if you like Legacy Maverick, which is where I have a lot of experience on, I used to play that a ton back in the day. Or if you just like, I don't know, if you like Captain Sisay, the old Weatherlight, if you like green-white stuff, I think this is more of the typical green-white deck for you, as opposed to the enchantments deck, which does green-white things, but not in the same way. It's enchantment-based, whereas this one's permanent-based. Anyway, those are the 7 decks I have to share for you today. Hopefully one of them suits your fancy. I hope you enjoy it. If you did enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, do the things. Follow me on Twitter. I make a ton of Brawl content. And I will be streaming all day tomorrow, although I don't know how many of you are actually watching this the day before the Brawl event goes live. But I will be streaming Historic Brawl as much as I can during the day that we get access to it. And I hope you do too, because I hope you play a lot of the Historic Brawl, because I'd love to show Wizards of the Coast that this is an awesome format, and we'd love to see more of it. And it's a good way to get us to burn wild cards for it, because I've already crafted a Scapeshift and a few normal rare wild cards in order to be able to play in it. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a blast tomorrow, and I'll see you next time on the Brawl Project. Have a good one.